Let me see real quick. So the next concept that I would like to go over, like I said, normally I would have you watch a separate video apart from class, but I actually haven't recorded one on this subject before, so it's worth doing today anyway. So one of the first concepts I want to talk about with your writing is relative clauses. If you take a look at this sheet, a relative clause is a sentence that's embedded within a sentence. That's pretty much what a relative clause is. And usually, a relative clause takes an adjective type function in your sentences. So, the relative clause that is a sentence within a sentence, usually it functions as an adjective that gives extra description to the noun. And when it comes to grammar, it's you have to kind of know which relative pronoun to put in certain instances. So we have relative pronouns who, whom, whose, which, or that. The biggest one to know the difference between is which and that. This is an issue that I'll often see in student papers. The difference between using which and that. If you look at a sentence below, you see how a sentence with a relative clause is structured. The students who were most impressive graduated with honors. Students who were most impressive graduated with honors. A relative clause always starts with one of these 5 relative pronouns, who, whose, which, or that. Because we're talking about human beings in this case, it starts with a who. The students who were most impressive graduated with honors. So who is the subject of the relative clause? Where is the verb? Impressive is the object. So a sentence within a sentence. The biggest thing to know with relative clauses are that some of them, the meaning of the sentence is dependent on that relative clause being there. If that relative clause isn't there, the sentence isn't going to make sense. The meaning of the sentence is going to be radically changed. Anytime you have a relative clause where it's especially essential to the meaning of the sentence, you don't put commas in front of those. And when it comes to relative clauses about people, usually it depends on whether on using the word who. Women who work are happier than women who don't work. Let's say you take that relative clause out, both of them, the sentence would read, women are happier than women. That doesn't make any sense, right? So that's why you leave commas out. If it's especially essential to the meaning of the sentence, you don't you don't put commas. Now, when you have a sentence where the meaning can be taken, where the meaning can remain the same, that is when you use commas. And oftentimes the main difference to know is if it's especially essential to the meaning of a sentence, or if it's not essential to the meaning of a sentence, usually there's a comma, and usually the relative pronoun that goes with it is which. So anytime you use the word which, WHICH, in a sentence, usually it's preceded by a comma, and it always begins a relative clause, and it's giving extra information that can be added onto the sentence, information that could otherwise be omitted. Going to the movies, comma, which I love to do, comma, can be very expensive. So going to the movies can be very expensive. So you see here, if you cut that phrase out, the sentence will still mean something. So, which I love to do is just extra information added on. That's called a non-restrictive clause. That's stuff that you can put in the sentence that you can cut. Arguably, it's clutter that's added onto your sentence. And the main thing that you need to know here is when to use which and when to use that. That's where people often go wrong with the grammar of the situation. When do you use which? When do you use that? Again, it depends on if the information can be omitted. The Empire State Building, which used to be the tallest building in the world, is still a popular tourist attraction. If you cut that out of the sentence, it reads the Empire State Building is still a popular tourist attraction. So the sentence still makes sense. If you use the relative pronoun that, that shows that the information in the sentence can't be removed and it still makes sense. The lessons that we have learned are no more important than the lessons that we have yet to learn. If you cut out both of those phrases that start with that, the sentence reads, the lessons are no more important than the lessons. So this is the main thing you got to know with this. If it's information that can be removed, use which with a comma. If it's information that can be kept, that if kept keeps the meaning of the sentence intact, use that. Okay. So this is one that often shows up that irritates English teachers. So definitely important to know the difference. If you read this sentence with which, if you say the lessons which we have learned are no more important than the lessons which we have yet to learn, if you read it aloud like that, it actually doesn't sound wrong to your ear. Like it makes sense, right? Using which doesn't change the meaning, but grammatically, you're supposed to use that in that situation. And that's that and which. You should also know when to use the word whom. Again, this depends on restrictive and non-restrictive. So my friend has 2 children whom she loves very much. If you cut that phrase out and just put a period at children, the sentence makes sense. So if you say my friend has 2 children who she loves very much, again, that's a case where it sounds okay to your ear, In spoken English, it's actually fine here. But in written English, you're supposed to use whom in this case. And anytime you use whom, you have both a subject and a verb that follows it. Okay, whom she loves. So there's some examples on the, I thought there were some examples on this. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, that's one concept I wanted to cover. The difference between that and which. Okay, who and whom. That both that and which and who and whom again depend on, is the information, will the sentence make sense without that phrase added into the sentence. So relative clauses is the first little mini lesson I wanted to cover. The other one, then we'll move into Savannah's presentation. The other one is prepositional phrases. Prepositional phrases. So in the next grammar quiz, I'll probably kind of lump both into one little quiz. But a prepositional phrase is a phrase, again, just like a relative clause, it gives extra information to the sentence. Most of the time, a prepositional phrase isn't work functions like an adjective. It functions like an adjective in the sentence. I had a grade school teacher that said that that it's a prepositional phrase by asking yourself the question, where can a cat go? Right? Like to the store, to the animal shelter. The cat. So that's a good way to kind of understand what a prepositional phrase is. The prepositional phrases always start with prepositions, and normally you either see them at the beginning of the sentence or the end of the sentence. This is something that students don't do a lot of the time. Is put commas where they need to go with prepositional phrases. So with this sentence, after going to the donut shop, the cop now had energy to give more tickets. Okay. And so this phrase, after going to the donut shop, modifies cop. So note how you kind of pause when you read it. After going to the donut shop, the cop now had energy to give more tickets. There's a pause there. So with that pause, you put a comma. Okay. If you put that phrase at the end of the sentence reads, the cop now had energy to give more tickets after going to the donut shop. Well, if you put that phrase at the end of the sentence, you don't pause. So if you put the phrase at the end of the sentence, you don't put a comma there. Oftentimes what I'll see is students will often not put the comma here. And then I'll see them put the comma here. Oops. So know that whenever you write, the comma goes in the opening phrase, not the final phrase in a sentence. And you can also do what's called an appositive. An appositive, just like how I showed you guys a second ago with relative clauses, like relative clauses is if you use which, it gives extra information end of the sentence that could be cut if you wanted to cut it. It's the same way with an appositive. So you would put commas around an appositive. So you can read this, you can write this: the cop, needing more energy to get tickets, went to the donut shop. The commas around this appositive suggest that you can cut it and it'll make sense. The cop went to the donut shop. So this is kind of if you want to blend that phrase in the middle of the sentence. Most of the time, the error that I see, that'll be not putting that comma right here. That comma right there is especially important. And whenever I grade, I'm so anal retentive that I usually will put the comma every time whenever I grade. I wonder why it takes me a long time to do it. I can't help myself. So, and know that put your commas where you pause after these phrases at the beginning of your sentences. Then just one final bit, the classic Oxford comma. The Oxford comma comes before the and whenever you have a list of 3 things or more. Courtney, Gavin, and Jeff went to go see the new Halloween film. Oftentimes I'll see people not put that comma there. So it's especially important to put that comma in a list, 3 things or more, before that final and. It can create grammatical chaos if you don't put it there. That's called the Oxford comma. There's some people who argue that you don't need it, that it's overkill. Those people are wrong. Okay. You know, I will just use logical fallacies here and say those people are morons. Okay. You need to have that Oxford comma there. So your next grammar quiz, I need to write some questions for it. I'll probably put one up this week. I need to give you guys a couple more grades in that category. But yeah, this next one then will be on preposition phrases and relative clauses. So I wasn't intending to give a grammar lecture. I just kind of did that on the spur of the moment. So you guys have questions about that? The difference between using that and which, or who and whom, or prepositional phrases? You guys have any questions that you want to ask me before we proceed with our discussion of the play?
No.
No, good. Yeah, like I said, I hadn't recorded a video, so that'll save me the trouble. It'll be on the recording for this class. So